Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 2 live stream for the 3M Open. Got to break down what to expect from conditions, as well as how to attack your exposure for tomorrow from the prop and the DFS side of things. But first off, welcome on into the live chat wherever you guys are. Hopefully you're having a fantastic Thursday and are ready to hop into tomorrow's action. So just to give you a little schedule of events to come, we're going to start it off with a look at the weather, then take a look at the DFS side of things. The end of the live stream, last 5 to 10 minutes, we'll be taking a look at the prop side, and hopefully we have a board by then. The round has not finished quite yet, but because I've got some plans later on this evening, wanted to make sure we could go live before I have to leave the house. So that's why we're live while round 1 is still going on, but a pretty clear picture of what to expect for tomorrow. Projections already done out there for Friday, so plenty to talk about. We got Anthony down there, says, good evening, Luke. Hit that like button. Couldn't agree anymore, buddy. First off, welcome on in, and hopefully you're having a solid start. What's going on, Steven? Let's do some round 2. Actually, it can't be that bad again. Totally agree with that there. So let's get after it. And what's going on, Rev Cloud? Let's start it off with a look at our sponsor for this live stream, which of course are our friends over there at the Ship It Nation. They are your source for all your needs on DFS, not just PGA DFS like we're talking about here, but every sport that you're getting exposure to, whether it's basketball, football when that comes back around, hockey, MMA, you guys name it. They've got experts, they've got projections, tools, a lot of process tips to go out there and help you out. So a great community, a sort of source that you can use regardless of sport that you're entering, which makes it a great companion for my kind of content. Of course, I focus on what I'm an expert at, but over there, they've got a whole team of experts helping you out with your DFS. So if you're somebody that plays more than one sport, they are a great subscription to add to your repertoire, as you're going to be getting all of that top tier content for every sport that you're entering. So regardless of whether you're a sub there or not, you can use code Luke10 to go out there and get a subscription. You'll get 10% off of your subscription and support the channel over here as well. But let's start it off with a look at today's conditions, which once again are still live, still going on out there, but the PM played significantly harder than the morning, which was expected. The winds were supposed to kick up as the day went on, and the firmness of the greens definitely ramped up as well. So it's not like we thought the PM was going to play easier today. It was more so if you were stacking that PM AM wave, hoping that Friday it would flip on its head. And not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but it's looking like that's going to happen. So, you know, in terms of stacking the PM for our main slate lineups, I'd say I'm like at a 6.5 out of 10 on it. I'm pretty glad we went out there and did so for a good amount of my lineups at least. But there is going to be slightly gustier conditions tomorrow morning. So we'll talk about the impact there. I'd say that takes back a little bit from the edge that we were looking at. But yeah, for some reason, I guess I'll just point it out right now. You can see there between like 7 to 11 a.m. that the wind gusts are a little bit higher than what they were calling for yesterday. The sustained winds, though, are going to ramp up as the day goes on. So it's a little bit of a conundrum, right? You've got the higher wind gusts in the morning, but the higher sustained winds in the afternoon. I'll give you my take on what I'm expecting for tomorrow, but because of those gustier conditions, I do think it slightly takes away from the edge, right? I think if anything, it's probably going to play to a 0.1, maybe 0.2 shot advantage towards the PM guys, which isn't the worst thing, all things considered, right? I still think you're going to get the better side of conditions, but it's not like a half a stroke to a stroke advantage like what we were getting at the Genesis or even the Open Championship. So if we were hoping for that, obviously, I don't think that's going to come true, but I guess you never know. Maybe the wind conditions could be calmer tomorrow morning than we're expecting. So I guess we don't want to write that completely off. And in terms of Friday, let me give you my take on Showdown here. So the conditions today deteriorated. Like I said, it was about a 0.5 shot difference between the two waves. I think that most of that difference was because of how receptive the greens were. In the morning, even mid-irons, even like 170-yard approaches were pretty much hitting and sitting in their ball mark. By the end of the day, it wasn't like you were getting firm bounces off of greens, but you weren't getting that same sort of stick. You were getting sometimes like a 4 or 5 yard bounce, and you certainly weren't getting the same kind of backspin that you were getting in the morning hours. And sometimes that would be because of some rain before lock, right, causing that moisture. But I've heard from people in the area, right, buddies of mine that live in Blaine, Minnesota, that it's all about the morning humidity, that for the last month or so, it's been really damp in the mornings, and that has had a huge effect on play. And in fact, the buddy that I was talking to plays a lot of his golf in the morning hours. So apparently this is something that happens this time of year in Blaine, where in the morning you get all that dew on the ground. It's a lot more humid than what you have in the afternoon. afternoon. And given that it's sunny for most of the day on Friday, I think that's the bigger factor, right? The firmness of these greens, they get more blemishes on them as the day goes on. So even though there are slightly gustier conditions earlier on, I still think they're going to get the better side of things. So obviously in a perfect world, we'd hope that the sustained winds and the wind gusts would be lower than the PM wave. We get half of our wish this time around. So you'll see that my player pool, my exposure is definitely favoring some of the early starters, but it's not going to be a 100% split. I don't think this is going to be a massive quote unquote edge between the two waves. I think something like a 0.4, maybe 0.5 shot difference like you saw today, maybe slightly better than that out there between the two waves, but you're not going to get that massive difference in terms of conditions. So just want to throw that out there. You could still definitely play some PM guys. And in terms of my exposure, I think I had 4 PM guys in my player pool. And then with AM guys, it's just over 20 that I'm using in my lineup. So definitely favoring the earlier starters. And if we take a look at today's action, so if we go down here and I show the waves on here, almost all of them were AM guys at the top. So, your top 2 scorers were both AM golfers, Andrew Novak and Kitayama, the best scores out of the PM wave. But a vast majority of these top 14 scores, in fact, of the top 14, only 4 of them came from the PM wave. So, that's 10 versus 4 out there with the top 14 scorers. And that's even only with the 0.5 shot difference, right, between the two waves. So even if it is only that 0.5 shot difference tomorrow, you still saw a huge effect out there with that ceiling score. So that's why I'm favoring the morning guys. If it ends up being gustier than expected, maybe it does play to 50-50 in terms of the wind. But even in that scenario, I'd rather have the morning softer greens, right? That's really why I'm hunkering down on the morning guys. It's not so much the wind anymore that's making me favor them. It's that humidity factor that we were just talking about. So let me go ahead, share our projections. Like I said, I'm going to keep this moving along. I've got some stuff to get to tonight. So go ahead, throw any questions you've got down in chat, and we'll talk about, first off, what I'm looking for in players tomorrow, and then a few of my favorite options out there for GPPs. But first off, we got Phil down there. You went 70% Mackenzie Hughes. I saw your comment. You said you were all in on him. That's a pretty damn good call. And you had Cam Davis out there too. And yeah, you did have Horschel. I'm right there with you on that. So yeah, I had Mackenzie. I have Cam Davis myself. Feel pretty decent about it. Heck, even Sam Burns, right? Hell of a bounce back from him. But I bit the bullet on Billy Horschel. He was in the proper wave. Ownership wasn't all that crazy. So if you were somebody that was playing the game this week, you probably played Billy Ho, right? I mean, he was in the proper wave, relatively low ownership. So I'm sure you're not the only one. Let's put it that way. That was disappointing for sure, but at this point, I'm numb to it, right? We've had so many withdrawals, so many that don't make sense. I think that this one's probably the most wacky out of all of them, as he was giving us quotes on Sunday night that he was so excited to get there, tweeting out, right, that he was going to be there at 7 a.m. on Tuesday, and he was at 7 a.m. on Tuesday at the range at the 3M Open. Just a wacky one for sure. Honestly, you've just got to accept it at this point. That's what I've come to learn playing DFS all these years. And just go, okay, whatever, move on. Because if you hold that against players, that's going to be a negative thing against you long term, right? Holding those biases is never a positive thing. I'll say that much. What's going on, Samuel? Good evening, everyone. You're looking decent. You need Michael Kim to go nuclear. There you go. Honestly, if Michael Kim is one of the guys you're worried about, it means you're having a pretty good week. So good stuff. Are the thumbnails the power couple to play? They are not. They are just random players that I include. But if you want to use that as your narrative, then go with it, right? How are we feeling about the EVR bounce back? Well, I'm going to mention him here in a few minutes. So how about I give you that take when we get to him? So let's start this off in terms of our plays. Like I said, mostly looking for AM guys, but there are a few things I'm looking for in players that I want to point out here. So just because I'm talking out these guys does not mean you have to use them in lineups. I'm more so just trying to give you some perspective on how I'm attacking my process. The sort of shots gained metrics, the sort of, maybe it's a bounce back towards the end of the round, trying to take that momentum into the next day. I'm just trying to give you various things to look for in players to add them to your player pool. Because my number one piece of advice when it comes to Showdown, hell, DFS in general, it doesn't have to be golf. It can be any sport that you are playing, guys. There has to be a reason for taking guys in your player pool. There are just too many options to choose from, especially in PJ DFS golf, when you have 156 players to choose from in a given slate. When you have that many options and you need to narrow it down to 6 players, you should not just be going, oh, that name looks good, let's take him in the lineup. Like, oh, I like Michael Thorbjornsen. Like, oh, I like Adam Shank, so I'm going to play him. What a funny name out there, right? Like, That can't be your process. You should be, for any given reason, getting to a certain player. And I'm going to talk about those as we talk about these players. So Sam Burns up top, he's an AM wave guy. One thing I want to point out is that there's not many AM players towards the top, right? Same issue that we had for main slate where we couldn't find as many guys for the PM AM wave. It's going to be a bit of an issue out there for round 2. So even if you were all in on the weather, right, I'm not out there for round 2. Even if you were, you would have issues up top. If you were trying to only play AM wave players, you'd have Sam Burns, you'd have JT Poston, you'd have Eric Van Rooyen, guys like Grillo, McNeely down there in the 8K range. But realistically, like 4, maybe 5 players up top that you'd have to use for your entire player pool, which unless all of them go out there and smash, right? Unless they're all going out there and shooting like 5-6 under par, might be an issue out there for taking down large field contests. So even if you were like a bigger advocate for the weather tomorrow than I was, and you really did like those AM players, my pushback would be that you probably need to play a PM guy or 2 up top. So in my player pool, right, I know no one on here is a PM guy that we're talking about here, but just know that there are PM guys up here that I am using. So I'm trying to keep it to relatively low-owned guys, right? I'm not trying to take a lot of mega chalk out there in the PM wave. And I guess to give you the highest 2-owned players, it's Tony Finau, Sahith, Theegala. You'd expect that after their solid performances. I mean, Tony Finau was 40% for main slate. Sahith actually surprisingly low owned. I would say that's probably the most surprising ownership number that we saw this morning, but that won't be the case out there for tomorrow. Because they had such a strong start to the week, both players have got it over the 30% mark. So, you know, those kind of players, I guess I tipped my hand a little bit, aren't going to be in my exposure. If they're chalk, they're playing in what I think might be marginally more difficult conditions, then I'd rather take a shot on somebody like Akshay, who I know somebody mentioned before, for a little bit of a bounce back. I know it's not an ideal tee time, but he was putting okay today. You know, I don't think that's a massive plus. I'd much rather see the ball striking version of Akshay Bhatia. But normally it's the exact opposite. Normally he's been, you know, solid from tee to green, very consistent in all 3 categories, and the putter's been a little bit hit or miss. So the fact that he was off round 1, you know, it puts me off a little bit, but that's also giving us a much lower ownership number on Akshay. And like I said, if I'm going to take a splash, you know, take somebody up top in the PM wave, I prefer the lower owned options. That doesn't mean that has to be the way that you go about it. But for me, that's what I'm comfortable with, right? I don't want to play 60, 70% of somebody in that way, right? Ideally, probably closer to like 40% for a player up top. And if I play Akshay at like 40% of my lineups, I'm going to have close to 2x leverage right there. So that's why I'm a little bit more comfortable with those players myself. Obviously, dodging some 30% owned players like Sahith and Tony are going to be a key part of my exposure for round 2. If they go out there, they smash in the harder conditions, well, that's not going to be a great thing for me. And I know that heading in, I'm going to have to accept that out there with my exposure. So Sam Burns, I think a player that you could use in the AM wave. The reason why I really like him, by the way, not just the fact that he's in the proper side of tee times, he really turned it on late. I mean, he had that snowman at hole number 8 hole number 9 actually. You had that snowman, which inexcusable. You just can't do that. And then turned it on his last 8 holes. I mean, he had 3 birdies in a 4-hole stretch. Finished it off with that sick up and down at 18. The kind of momentum that you like heading into round 2. And you're giving him, you know, only a 22% ownership number, because if he didn't have that quad, right? If Sam Burns, by the way, if he was in the top 5, the top 10, like he easily could be, if he had -5 next to his scorecard, well, all the slappies would be playing them, right? All the casuals out there in the world would have him in their lineups. They go, oh, AM player, right? Soft greens. He played well out there. He'd probably be 30% owned, like somebody like a Theegala or a Tony Finau up top. Instead, because of that one blow-up round, same thing with Joaquin Niemann last week, right? He had multiple big blowups. Only reason he wasn't mega chalk out there for Sunday Showdown, because of the fact that his score looks a little bit worse on paper. So he played much, much better than you would think for a player that shot -1. And you can kind of take advantage of that at times, right? He would be probably close to 30% if he hadn't had that hole. And because of that, I'll take him out there with the morning tee time. Next up, we got Eric Van Rooyen. I had somebody mention him down in chat. You know, he's a tough play, right? I'm using him out there in lineups, but you're not going to feel very good about EVR. He's got horrible course history, right? Easy to say in hindsight that like, oh, duh, I should have known that he was going to go out there and blow up today. But reality is he's out of form after round 1, right? Doesn't have the best course history. So you may say, why are you playing him, Luke? Well, there's one thing called pedigree, right? I know that Eric Van Rooyen is a hell of a golfer. He's a very streaky player. I've seen this guy make 6, 7 birdies in a row out there for any given round. I mean, first round leader, I mean, he's been sniffing those all season. So you've got to take a step back sometimes and say, or he could, right? As my boy DGen75 would say, like the nastiest, most ugly plays on paper sometimes get there, right? Or he could, as my boy would say. So out there at 9.7% ownership, right, he's the kind of guy that you kind of just got to close your eyes, go, you know what? Trust the process out there with it and live with the results. He could go out there, start 2 over par through his first 4 holes, and yeah, he's probably not turning it around, right? If you're starting at +4, you're 2 over early, you're getting the jet home, right? You may be even asking your fiance at that stage to go out there and get your flight arrangements done. Like literally, I mean, you saw that with Rory McIlroy at the Open Championship. On the flip side, though, there's another world, there's another parallel universe out there where maybe he does start 2 under through his first 3 holes. In that universe, he's only 3 shots off the cut line. You know for damn sure he's going to go out there and grind it out for you. The upside is there with an Erik van Rooyen, and if you're in a large field contest, you've got to get different. He's going to give you a bunch of leverage. Now, there's a lot of negative there. There's an extremely low floor because of the lack of interest that could be there for him. However, you're getting a world-class player, a guy that's going to be aggressive. He has to be aggressive to go out there and make the cut and still could be a ceiling performer. And if he is, you're going to get him at a fraction of the ownership of guys around him. Just to give an idea with ownership, right? A lot is blacked out, and that is posted over there on the Patreon page. So if you're on there, you could follow along with that version of the spreadsheet. But you'll see that, right, Cam Davis, right, is nearly twice the ownership of an EVR. Heck, guys like Keith Mitchell are like twice the ownership. Tom Hoge just under twice the ownership as somebody as a Erik van Rooyen. They don't all have twice the hit rate as somebody like an EVR, right? So that's the argument to go out there and play him in your lineups, is that his ceiling potential is maybe fractionally lower than the guys around him because of the fact that he didn't play as well today, but it's not half the win equity. It's not half the ceiling performance equity as those other players around him. So yeah, I'm playing EVR. You don't feel the greatest about the play, but from a pure GPP angle, right? Pure upside and leverage angle, there's a world where he gets there and that you have to have him for tomorrow. And like Mav McNeely is a little bit of a safer option. And, I hate to use the word safe in Showdown because there's no such thing as a safe play, but you at least know that he's going to grind it out a little bit more, right? He hasn't ejected over the first day, but you are going to pay for that with your ownership. So he is somebody I'm mixing in because of the tee time, but I wanted to point out more of like a traditional play in this range because you don't have to take the Erik van Rooyens of the world, right? You can mix in a Matt McNeely, right? A Grillo, morning tee time, great course history, right? I think is perfectly in play in this range, but you're going to get an inflated ownership number there, right? Like Grillo, for example, is relatively high owned for this week. So if you're looking for leverage, maybe you don't take these sort of players. But yeah, the Erik van Rooyens are what you need to do if you're looking for mega leverage. Down to the 7Ks, want to point out a few more players. Kurt Kitayama, more of like one of those traditional sort of plays, not super low owned, not somebody that's going to give you a ton of leverage, but he is an AMT time. He hit the ball beautifully with his approach play round 1. And is only $7,800. So very affordable, right? Cheaper than your average player out there with your salary allocation. And I've got him at 12.4%. So just like a Mav McNeely, you're not going to get a ton of leverage by taking that sort of player. But as long as the rest of your lineup isn't mega chalky, it's also not going to be a huge detriment, right? You're not taking a 25, 30%er at that spot. Where you'd really be getting into trouble. And honestly, compared to some of the other guys around him, I've got other chalky guys here, like a Thor Bjornsson in that similar sort of range, Mackenzie Hughes, a Patrick Rogers at $8,100. Because there's enough guys that popped out there for round 1, Kitayama is not the 20% that he could be out there for a round 2 showdown. Like myself, some Johnny Vegas hit the ball well today, finished the wrong strong as well. Has an elite tier course history, a runner-up finish 3 years ago, is $7,600 in the proper wave. So he's a little bit lower owned. I've got him at only about 7.5%, but nothing crazy in terms of a play right there. Austin Eckroat, not a player that you're getting a ton of leverage on. Same thing with Doug Gim here. I've got it about 10% ownership, but we are getting with both players or guys that are still severely mispriced. And because Eckroat didn't go off today, right? If he would have shot -3, -4, I mean, forget it. Eckroat would have been 30% out there in GPPs. Because he just is slightly under par, right? I believe -1. Play finished up since I did the projection. So you might have gone to even par, might be -2. Just marginally under par. He's not going to get 15-20% ownership like he should. Same thing with Doug Gim, right? Respectable round, a couple under par. Shots gained metrics off the tee and on approach looked really good through his first 16 holes. And at $7,300, these sort of players, I'll mix into lineups, right? Once again, they're not going to be your massively leveraged play that you're taking at sub 5%. But if you're mixing them in as filler plays out there in lineups, I think they're totally fine. The shots gained metrics on both check out, right? They did it in a sustainable fashion in round one. And both are arguably about $1,000 too cheap out there in this kind of field. Moving on into a little bit of a cheaper spot here, we've got Davis Riley and Adam Schenk. Both players were able to gain with their approach play today. Riley, I've got especially low owned. Excuse me here, guys. Let me get some water. All right. That's much better. But yeah, Davis Riley, sub 5% here. I've got him at about 2.1% ownership. Both these guys gained on approach. They're birdie or better percentage poppers. Just to give you an example, right? Davis Riley is a top 10 birdie percentage player in this field. Adam Schenk up there as well. He's top 30 in this field with birdie or better percentage. So guys that are aggressive, fill it up with the flat stick. In round one, went out there and hit the ball pretty well. So, not anything insane. Like they didn't gain like 4 or 5 strokes on approach or anything, but very respectable performances and now get the better side of tee times, or at least what I perceive to be the better side of tee times. And then the last play I'll point out here is going to be Matthew Neesmith at $6,600. One thing I'll say is I don't have a ton of 6K guys on my player pool. I just don't need them. I have a lot of like mid-tier exposure. Like I'm heavier on the high end of the 7s and high end 8K guys than I am on some of like the 10K options, mostly because of tee times, right? There's not a bunch of AM guys up top. So I'm not taking a bunch of double spend ups, right? Like I'm gonna have some double spend ups where I need somebody like a Neesmith to mix in, but that's not my main lineup construction out there for tomorrow. So there's not going to be as many guys that I'm using in this range. But if I need to go down here, a Neesmith makes a little bit of sense. Morning starter, which again, I like, at least for my exposure, and a guy that nearly won his last tournament out at the ISCO, was out there and just to the very end was in contention. I believe Barracuda also played pretty well out there. He's sub 5% owned, and the approach play and off the tee play was pretty spot on out there for round one. So, shots gained metrics, you can check that box off. The form heading in, you can check that box off as well. And historically, Neesmith is a very streaky player. Normally, he'll go on stretches of form where he'll carry it for maybe a month, month and a half, and then completely disappear. So when I see any semblance of form from him, I normally try and play him for a week, maybe even 2 or 3 weeks after that. So I'll be using them for Showdown. Again, there are some really ugly plays down here that you can get to, but unless you have to, I wouldn't recommend it, right? Like I think the scatter shot approach in the 6K range is actually a little bit more viable out there for main slate because the pricing isn't as soft as it is for Showdown, right? Like Showdown, a $7,300 Gim, a $7,500 Austin Eckroat. Like I know that's pretty similar to his price for main slate, but these prices are just extremely soft, right? They're soft as baby shit out there for round two. So you don't necessarily need to have all of those 6K guys in the lineup. So those are a few guys I'm looking for. Hopefully it gives you an idea of what you can look for in players for tomorrow. And now we'll catch up on some questions. You were surprised to see Clanton struggle after starting so hot. Do I think he bounces back? Not sure. I guess we'll have to see if he bounces back. If I had to make an educated guess, I'd say that he's got a good shot too. I mean, the kid's looked like an absolute stud. But at the same time, maybe he just had a few good events, right? That's something that's perfectly possible. Obviously, not all these guys that come out here and show us something end up being world killers. So I think that that's pretty realistic as well. So I guess for your sake, right, sounds like you used him in a few lineups. Hopefully he bounces back for you, but I don't know if I would count on it. Got a favorite single entry bounce back. So yeah, if you're looking for like a bounce back guy, EVR, I guess would be the main one that we talked about. Yeah, probably EVR. He'd probably be my favorite. Let me think if there's any others that I'm really mixing in. A Sam Stevens, I guess I would want to point out as well. Not the best day today, but approach play was okay outside of like 2 holes where he lost most of his shots gained approach. And then his off the tee play was into the positive. So horrible round, just like EVR. Like I said, really low floor on those kind of players. But if you're looking for a bounce back at super low ownership, it's probably one of these two. Guys that were darlings heading into the week that, if they start off hot, maybe they keep it going. But if they start off shitty, watch out. What's going on, Barry? Let's go P-Rod, Cham Kim for round 2 smashes. Okay, yeah, if P-Rod gets hot round 2, he's going to have quite the lead, you think, right? After his -6 rounds. And hey, Chan Kim, I'm with you on that as well. Burns was a hero for us. Retweet on that one, that's for sure. In my week-long poll, who is the pivot I'm most happy with? It's a great question, Steven. I haven't thought about it. Let me think about it right now. So pivot, we're going to go with like has to be relatively low owned, right? So we'll go out of the top. We'll skip the 9, 10K range. We'll stay out of there. Maybe Taylor Pendrith. I mean, Pendrith is -5 at this stage. I feel pretty decent about that. I don't know if I'd call him a pivot, though. He was still like 12% on. Maybe it is Pendrith. I probably have to look at my lineups, to be honest with you. But like off the top of my head, Putnam played pretty well. I played him this week. Ended up having a pretty good round one. Carson Young, I played a bunch of him, right? Talked about him yesterday. I feel pretty decent about that. I don't know if I'd call them pivots, though, right? Like they're all like kind of just average ownership for the range. If you're talking about like a truly low-owned guy that went off for me today, not a bunch up top. It was honestly, guys, a lot of chalk that went off in round one. That's for damn sure, especially up in like the 9, 10K range. What's going on, DK? What's going on, Luke? Glad to see you, bro. Of course. Welcome on to the live stream. Glad to see you as well. And you appreciate the content in terms of the $33 single entry. Would I have considered Tony or Sahith in that kind of contest? So yeah, I think you can play them in that kind of contest. Heck, even in large field GPPs, they're playable. They're just not my favorite options. And honestly, if I was going to play them, it probably would be a single entry. I'd go out there and do so because you're not worrying about beating like 20,000 other entries or even like 4,000 or 5,000 other entries. Like you might be in some of the other showdown kind of GPPs. Those kind of contests, right? I don't want to have to play against, like, even if it's only a 6,000 entry contest, like 2,000 other people. If it's like a 10,000 entry contest, right? I don't want to have to play against like 3,000, 4,000 other people out there in contests. But yeah, single entries, I'm okay. I'm more okay with that. Yeah. I probably would still avoid them because I like being a contrarian mofo. I like going out there and playing balls to the wall. But yeah, I'd be more okay with it for sure in that kind of contest. All you need for the showdown is one time. Exactly. And the one thing I'll say, Chris, to go out there and back that up even more, it's only been 18 holes, right? Like these guys can have a bad day. Right? Everyone has a bad day, regardless who you are out there. No matter how good, how consistent you are at what you do, you're always going to have bad days. Myself included, right? Today, right? Lost money on props. Not something that I say very often, frankly. We've had a very good year when it's come to that side. But yeah, in Showdown, it's the same way, right? Like maybe EVR does have that kind of round. It'd be pretty sweet to have out there for main slate. But in Showdown, I definitely want to have some just in case. Hoffman in early tee time, is his putter going to be better tomorrow? That's the question, right? If he has a better putter, he probably has a pretty decent day. Let's take a look at the shots gained metrics. So let me bring up that tab over here on my internet browser, and let's find Charlie Hoffman. So yeah, I lost 5 strokes putting. Honestly, yeah, he's a good bounce back candidate. You're spot on, right? Lost 5 strokes putting, gained in all other 3 categories. I think I'm adding him to the player pool, Greg. I didn't have him before. I think I'm adding him now. Antonio says, you can honestly see Grill going nuclear. Putter was cold and still shot -3. I love him this week. I bet him. Love the course history. I mean, just top 5 galore out there for Emiliano Grillo. So I think you're spot on with that. I think Akshay kind of fits that too. And then even Nick Dunlop. I hate that I'm giving this away. He's a PM guy that I'm playing. The kid hit the ball beautifully today. Just literally could not make a putt for his life. He had multiple like 5-footers that he missed for birdie. And then that 10 to 15 foot range outside of, I think he made one on hole 1 or hole 2 from that like 15-foot range. Outside of that, he made nothing the entire day. I know that because I tilted the ever living shit out of him on a prop for round 1. So yeah, I would throw him out there too. Grillo, love the tee time there, but I have to say I'm playing Dunlop in the PM because of that too. What was the stat profile for Hoagie? I'll let you know right now. So Hoffman, by the way, if you're looking at stat profiles, and thank you for Greg for pointing that out because I actually didn't have Hoffman in my player pool. An absolute wizard. Hoagie, on the other hand, lost 1.5 strokes on approach and gained in the other 4 stat categories. So I've got to say, for Hoagie, that's really not what we want to see. Like normally, I mean, especially at the Open Championship, to give you an idea, it was the exact opposite, right? He was gaining like 8 strokes on approach and then losing everywhere else. So a little weird, a little bit of a conundrum there because you're like, okay, like he should turn it around, right? It's Tom Hoagie, one of the best iron players that we have on tour, but at the same time, it was jarringly bad, right? Over a stroke and a half into the negative. I don't really know what to think there, Derek, other than I'll say that it's a one round sample size, right? It's only 18 holes that he played. He could certainly turn it around. So yeah, stat profile didn't look good, but I don't know if I would like avoid him because of that. Like he's more than capable of gaining strokes on approach because I mean, just look at the major championship field and what he did at Troon. Do I like Cam Davis for the rest of the week? I like him at this golf course. He's played particularly well here. So, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me for him to go out there and continue his strong form, but, we'll have to see. I think the shots gained profile today was kind of all over the place. You the man, Luke. Thanks for the consistency. Appreciate you, Gritty Gang. Absolutely. Phil says, Woodland looking good. Yeah, dude, I'm glad to see that, dude. He's just one of the better guys out here. He's from the city. I'm from Delray Beach, Florida. He's from Delray Beach. And yeah, he gained across all 4 stat categories. I've got a soft spot for him as well. All right, let's talk through some prop stuff now. So that's all I've got for DFS. Like I said, I had to keep this moving a little bit because of some plans tonight. If you have any DFS questions, you can still throw those down in chat. But for the time being, we're going to take a look at props for the next 5-10 minutes. If you haven't already smashed that like button, want to go ahead and have you guys do that now. And also make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss any of the content to come. But in terms of props, round 2, I think we're going to have to adjust a little bit. Round 1 probably played as easy as what we're going to see, at least over the first 2 days. Round 2, with the winds kicking up, I think you're going to see slightly more bogeys. Now, the only way to really combat that would be if they moved up tee boxes and made pins easy. So as of right now, we don't really have any idea of knowing that, but I'd venture to say that they probably do try and set it up a little bit easier, but it's likely not to overcome the entire conditions, right? The conditions are going to be a pretty big impact on play. So even if they do try and soften it up a little bit, right, maybe shorten up the golf course, it's not going to overcome that factor. So I think the scoring average is probably going to get a little bit worse, but I just want to put the asterisk on that because if they do move up tee boxes, like if they move up all the par 3s, they move up like holes 2 and 3 that are playing into the wind, rather than playing like 0.6 strokes over par like they did, like they could get that down to close to even par. They move up a par 3 or 2, right? Maybe that shifts it another like 0.3 strokes. Like they could manufacture an easier score. Like we've seen this happen before. That's the reason I want to throw it out there as an asterisk, because sometimes the tour is soft as baby shit, right? They're soft as Charmin. They go, you know what? We're going to give these players a bone out there on a harder day. I don't know if I'd count on that, but I at least want to mention that possibility because it's happened multiple times this year. But in terms of just looking at the weather, translating that to round 2, it looks like things are going to get a little bit harder. So in terms of a scoring average, that'll probably go to closer to like 0.4 under par. Birdie average might go marginally down, right? Maybe to like 3.75. Bigger difference for me is probably going to be at the bogey average. I think that'll probably go up to around 3 per round, which is where you're going to see most of the difference out there with your scoring, at least what I'm expecting out there for tomorrow. Fairway average, likely not to change very much. Maybe will slightly go down with the slightly higher wind gusts. And then the green regulation average, that'll probably go down a little bit more than the fairways. When you're launching the ball up with your irons, they're affected by the wind a lot more than when you're hitting a driver. And it's not like you're hitting a driver low, but just because of how hard you're hitting it, because of the fact that you're shaping most of your driver shots anyways, irons are a little bit more affected by the windier conditions. So I don't think these are going to move drastically by any means, but definitely shading towards the more difficult side of it. In terms of props, I know that Prize Picks doesn't have anything up yet, but I'm hoping that Underdog can give us something here, because if not, I'm just going to have to give you guys a bit of a game plan. So yeah, it looks like we've got an Underdog board. That is completely clutch. And then after we go through this Underdog board, we can take a look at some of the Live Golf stuff as well. They've got a Live Golf London event starting tomorrow morning, of course, because it's overseas. And they only have birdie or better matchups up, but I guess we could take a look at those as well. Let's catch up with chat and then find a few props. Thanks for the heads up, and that is clutch. Because if not, I was going to have to hop on out of here, which I didn't want to do. So looking at these projections here, oh boy, they really have these higher. I thought that they were going to be like 0.5 higher than what they had them today, and they're 0.5 to 1 stroke higher than what they had for round 1. So the guys that are an entire stroke higher definitely intrigue me for some unders. As here's what I want to say, right? Like I mentioned, like them like manufacturing an easier score. I can guarantee you right now, right? It's going to play harder tomorrow. It will not play over par. They will manufacture an under par scoring average here. So for as much as we think the wins are going to be more difficult, that's why I wanted to throw the asterisk out there, because it's not going to play as a hard golf course. You're still going to see -5, -6 rounds, even in the higher wind conditions tomorrow. You're going to see less of them, right? Like we're probably not going to see 13 -5s or better, but maybe it's like 6 or 7, right? -5s or better. And the fact that they have a lot of these guys at like 70 strokes, like 69.5 on some, kind of feels like a little bit of an overreaction. So I want to bring up DraftKings. I want to see if any of these books have odds up quite yet, because at least I think that these might be too high, the strokes lines. It doesn't look like DraftKings has anything up. Let me see if FanDuel's posted. And we'll do the same thing with Caesars, because I have a sneaking suspicion that we could have some unders on strokes to take. Let me reshare my screen here for you guys, and let's see what we're working with. So Caesars doesn't have anything up. And let's see if FanDuel does. No, FanDuel doesn't have anything up either. So we can't compare to the sportsbook quite yet. Same thing with DraftKings, by the way. They didn't have anything posted. But my intuition here, at least my initial lean, is that like a Burns at 69.5 in the morning wave, like give me that, right? Trying to find guys in the morning wave because I do think it'll play slightly easier. So like maybe a Poston, but like a McNeely, right, at -1 for a push. Like that feels like a decent option. Grillo had a really good round. He's got elite tier course history. Like maybe this. I'm just spitballing right now, so I don't know if these are going to be things that I take, but like, you know, maybe an EVR you avoid because of his really, shitty form. But guys like Burns, Grillo, like they didn't play poor golf by any means. And in fact, like I'm using a different account to do my betting myself, so I'm probably going to go over my phone and enter this now. But like Grillo, Burns, this is going to be the slip that we go for out there in the slip. So I'm going to go ahead and do so on my end now. I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to get myself in trouble by saying too much here. But yeah, I'll be entering this combination of two. Let's put it that way. So let me do that here. And then we'll see if we can find any game plan for Prize Picks, because my guess would be, guys, that these are going to be like 0.5 lower on Prize Picks. I can't imagine that they're going to have guys at like 70 strokes like Burns on Prize Picks. Like I think at worst we're probably going to get the same lines on Prize Picks. Like if anything, I think they might even be 0.5 lower, even an entire stroke lower, like I was saying before. So we've got Burns under 69.5. We've got Grillo under 70 strokes, and I'm going to put 1.5 units on that one. Let's do that. So that's a 2.7x payout, by the way. So the payout multiplier isn't ideal, but I do think that these are pretty soft projections. So yeah, my entry will pay just about $1,000 out there for tomorrow, which is what I'm looking for in a payout. All right, so let's do those two. And I guess we could potentially even add a second slip. So we're not going to have the full Prize Picks board, I'd imagine, before we get out of here. But let me give you another slip here on Underdog because of that. So McNeely I was looking at before, then this Poston prop I was considering too. If Poston was at 70 strokes, I'd almost for sure be mixing him in here. But he is, a tire stroke higher than that. I do think it's funny, by the way, guys. And they have guys like Tony Finau at 60.5. Same thing with Sahith. Like they're the same sort of player as like a Sam Burns, but they're in the PM wave, right? The side that might be more difficult. So I'm surprised that they're an entire stroke lower. So I don't hate that one. These guys in the PM wave, maybe I end up playing them at some point as well. But yeah, for our early exposure, I want to keep this to morning only players. So if I was going to enter anything, I'm probably not going to enter this combination of two myself until we get sportsbook odds. And like, I know for sure that they're really good value. But yeah, that first combination that we did of Grillo, then Sam Burns, definitely two props that I really like here. So for right now, honestly, if you're watching this live stream, if you're watching the free content, that's probably what I would stick to. My rest of my exposure is going to come out after we get the sportsbook odds and some props over here on Prize Picks to look at. So I like to do my line comparisons, right? I like to make sure I'm taking the best line available. I do feel confident saying right now, though, that these will probably be the best lines that we can get. Like I can't see Sam Burns being at 70 or 70.5, and Grillo, like I said, at worst, probably at 70 strokes. So yeah, I feel pretty good about those two. The McNeely at 70, I'd say I feel pretty good about that one as well. The Poston one is the only one I'm a little bit iffy on out of those 4 props. So maybe you just want to go with these 3, right? You can obviously handle all of your exposure yourself, but those are 3 props that definitely stand out to me. In terms of the live golf stuff, we don't have like birdie lines or strokes lines to look at, but birdie or better matchups, you can find value on them from time to time. But more than anything, I just want to give you guys an idea of what to expect from this golf course, which I think is going to be a lot of birdies and a reliance on driving distance. So let me find the golf course schematic. Let me give you an idea of what like the hole by hole breakdown looks like, so I can tell you why I think that's the case. And this is obviously very speculative. We've never seen this golf course before. In fact, I don't think it's ever hosted a professional golf tournament. But just looking at the scorecard yardage, it looks like power is going to matter. And here's why I say this. Hole number 2 is 337. That is drivable for somebody like Bryson, right? Hole 5 is 610. If it's not playing directly downwind, only your elite tier power players are going to get there. They've got some long par 3s, right? Like 199 right there. 170 isn't all that bad, I guess, but like these par 4s, 500 yards, 470. Like you've got a lot of longer par 4s and then drivable par 4. Like it's the extremes, right? And on those extremes, the power players are the ones you want, right? You want the guys that can drive those kinds of holes, and you want the ones that can also still make birdies out there in the longer par 4s. Next par 5 is 632. You have another drivable par 4. Look at this, like 12. It's only 300 yards. Next par 5 is 600 yards. So, and you can look at this, another par 3 that's 244. This looks like a golf course where your power players, they're driving 2 holes. You can still reach the 3 par 5s, and you potentially even have some like longer par 4s that you can dismantle. So if I was looking at these matchups, I was thinking about this before, is like try and find some power players versus guys that don't have that same kind of firepower off the tee. So just kind of going through this, like DJ, right, is the kind of guy that, he's a much better driver than somebody like Patrick Reed. Let's see if we can find somebody like a Cam Smith under, like Brooks Koepka, a much, much better driver than what we have with Cameron Smith. And say the same thing about this Joaquin Niemann prop too, though. Like Joaquin Niemann's, right, a better driver than Cameron Smith. So like trying to find that kind of narrative, and maybe it doesn't even have to be the studs that you go with, but like Dean Burmester is a much better driver than Taylor Gooch. So like maybe you use him as somebody that you're mixing in for that exposure. So I don't know if I love these birdie or better matchups. In fact, there's a good chance I don't play them because they're normally just small edges. But if you were going to try and find anything here, that's what I would be going with. Leishman's a much better driver than Lahiri, so like maybe you could do that. Lucas Herbert is also a much better driver than Arnaban Lahiri. And one thing to note is probably these Lahiri fades are probably my favorites because he's one of the lowest birdie percentage players in the LIV Tour to begin with, and he can't hit the ball long at all. He's one of the shortest guys out there on the LIV Tour. So yeah, Lucas Herbert, very aggressive player. Actually, I think I want to enter this prop because I like the Lahiri fade a lot. And Lucas Herbert is an absolute madman, makes an absolute metric fuck ton of birdies. So maybe we do enter that one. And then we try and find another one of those like driver discrepancies. Like maybe it is Burmester over Gooch. Gooch is a hell of a player, though. So I don't know if that's my favorite fade. We could go DJ over Reed. So let's compare some birdie averages now. So that was the golf course thing I wanted to show you. Let's take a look at some averages. Let's see. Oh, they changed their they changed the UI on the Live Golf site. So they moved all this stuff around. All right, that wasn't too bad to find though. So let's look at some of the birdie numbers on here. So just to show you what I was talking about, like Lahiri, you got to scroll the whole way down here to, I guess he's improved himself a little bit, but he's still number 31 on the LIV Tour when it comes to his birdie average. And Lucas Herbert, for example, is number 9 on tour, right? So I like Herbert a lot. He's also a much better driver. So that's why I really like that top one. What I'm trying to find out is what is Burmester versus Gooch? So I know Burmester makes a lot of birdies. Burmester is number 14. What is Gooch? And Gooch is number 19. So Burmester is better than Gooch. That could be, it could be a look. DJ versus Reed. I know DJ is ranking out better than Reed does. So you can see, right, DJ is number 6 here. Patrick Reed, in terms of birdie percentage, down here at number 19. So that one would be in play. And I guess it doesn't have to be like a 2-man. I guess we could make this a bigger slip. Let's look at the Joaquin versus Cam Smith one. So Cam Smith is number 8 in birdie percentage, and Joaquin is number 1, right? So like if you were going to attack against Cam Smith, then maybe this is the way you go about it. One thing I'll say about Cam Smith is even though he's not the best driver, he can still at least drive it a long way. So maybe we don't pick on Cam Smith. Maybe he's not the best person to do it with. Well, I really like, I got to say, out of these 3 props, that Arnabon Lahiri prop is definitely my favorite. It's honestly not even close out of those. And in fact, if you had like another sport you're playing, or maybe you have another lock out there for PGA that you really like, or one of these birdie or better matchups that you really fancy yourself, pair it up with this Lahiri prop. I like these other lanes we went through, I think make a little bit of sense. But this birdie or better matchup out of all of them is definitely my favorite. Let's see, any other questions? Can we slam EVR? You can slam him if you have some stones, but I would say use him as leverage. He shouldn't be a conviction play out there in your lineups, but he is going to give you a lot of differentiation. Not many are going to be using him out there in lineups. Jamming him, though, feels like a little bit of a scary prospect. Jake Knapp has an AMT time. Can he string, or he can string birdies together? I like him, Derek. Yeah, he hit the ball pretty well today. Approach play was at least serviceable in round 1. A very aggressive player. He's long off the tee as well, which obviously, right, you were just talking about live golf and distance, but for the PGA Tour event as well, that 3M Open driving distance has been extremely helpful there too. I think he's in play for that event. So yeah, I like it. Alrighty, guys, that is all we've got for this live stream. Got to go ahead and hop on out of here, but hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared for all of your exposure tomorrow. Best of luck with all of your lineups, all of your prop slips that you're entering, and go out there and make your boy proud. Let's take down a GPP or 2. Let's cash some prop slips, and overall, have a ball for our Friday exposure. Best of luck, like I said before. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you haven't already smashed that like button, well, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and do so before you hop on out of here, and let's have ourselves a Friday.